So today what we're going to do is talk about the biggest theft of property, value, and freedom the world has ever seen. And that's the orchestrated hyperinflation that's going on now. So the very fact that the powers that be came out and allowed the news broadcasters, the business shows, and the politicians to start discussing transitory hyperinflation and transitory inflation is the signal that inflation has been with us for a long time. If you think about it, the government takes in around $2 trillion in income taxes a year as a rough figure. So in less than a month, they've spent more money than they take in taxes in 3 years. If you look at unfunded liabilities plus spending, we've spent over $27 trillion since Biden took office. If you think about it, world gross economic product is somewhere around $60 trillion. So far the U.S. government has spent approximately half of the money that is made by the entire world in a year. And we're not even halfway through the year yet. So what I want to talk about is a tool for you to use and how to forecast and make buying decisions, saving decisions in the future in a hyperinflation scenario. So transitory hyperinflation is just another word for hyperinflation that's already started and they don't know when it's going to end. What they should have done is called it transitional hyperinflation, because you're entering in a hyperinflation environment and it's not going to end anytime soon. When they make the fourth round of stimulus, you'll see hyperinflation get another huge kick, because hyperinflation comes from several causes. One is introduction of non-backed currency. Another way is extension of loans, which are an indirect injection of cash. If these loans are forgiven loans, they're even more toxic. So the third way is price escalation. And price escalation can come from several sources. One source, which we have in abundance now, is there's a whole lot of money chasing the same finite amount of goods. But the situation is even worse than that, because there are less goods available and more money. So that accentuates the inflation. The last thing is pent-up demand. So everybody's been locked down for a year, so you have pent-up demand. So those three things are all increased price drivers, and the other three things are increasing money supply. So when you take this all into account, that's 6 factors that are driving hyperinflation. Anybody that doesn't discuss those 6 factors when they're explaining hyperinflation to you either does not know what's going on or they're deliberately lying to you. Now, the first tool I want you to think about and use is a personal inflation index. And what that is every month you total up the cost of the goods you normally buy, and we think of these as consumables. So this is energy, whether it's electricity or fuel for your vehicles, fuel for furnaces, so your energy costs. The second thing is food. The next thing is consumables such as drugs, such as home care products, cleaning materials, anything you need to survive that's consumed on a monthly or daily or weekly basis. And what you're going to want to do is start keeping costs records of this in a notebook. And every month you want to add this up and compare it to the previous month, divide it out, and see what the percentage of inflation is. And the reason you want to do this is you want to see what items are hyperinflating versus which items don't have much inflation. Because what you want to do is go out into the market and buy as much of the things that are hyperinflating as you can financially afford. That way you're actually saving money in the long term. And I'll give you an example. So building material. If you buy a building material and you're a contractor, it went up almost 300%. So if you could pre-purchase building material for an entire year's worth of projects, you would save thousands of percent of inflation. So what that is saying is, for instance, another example is if you go and buy a bar of soap and that bar of soap's $1 and next month it's $5, if you pre-purchase that, you saved 500%. So that's what you need to start thinking about is what are the items you purchase that are hyperinflating, and you want to buy them now while your money has maximum buying power, because every month you're going to lose buying power. The next thing you want to do, and why the personal inflation index is so important, you want to pre-buy these goods. Because in the days when Nixon was president and Carter were president, we had hyperinflation, and it was the worst under Carter. We had price controls and wage controls. So eventually that's going to happen. So in this hyperinflationary index, the government's going to eventually try to control it through that. So you'll have a wage cap where people can't have a raise in wages for a certain period of time. And all that does is really pins up the inflation and it releases it later. With price controls, what normally happen is companies and businesses and individuals wouldn't sell things for the period of time that price control was in effect. So that increased the demand, creating more inflation in negative, in opposition to what it was actually trying to do. So you can expect the government's going to try these kind of controls, and these controls hold the inflation back, but they make it much, much worse and compound it when it's released. So what that does is gives you huge bumps in hyperinflation in intervals based on these price controls and wage controls. So now the last thing I want to talk about to help you through this crisis is they're talking about all of these stimulus programs where they're building things, they're doing programs, they're doing this and they're doing that. Most of these are make-work projects. They'll have no real value long term. It's just another way to inject currency. But the problem that you're going to run into is these programs are going to have priority on buying goods. And it's going to gravely increase massively the demand for certain products. So what you can see in the future is if we actually have a road building, a school building, and a public works building projects, that's going to make the pressure that we're seeing in building material even worse. So you're going to be competing for materials against these government projects, and they will have priority. So you're going to get whatever's left over, if anything at all. The same thing is going to happen with office supplies, cleaning materials, food, anything that these projects will suck up. They will have priority, and they will increase the rate at which you're paying for stuff. So you're going to see super hyperinflation in the commodities that are driving and necessary for these building projects that the government wants to do. So anything like that that you know that you need to get that will be consumed by these buying projects, you need to get it now, because eventually in a hyperinflationary market, price no longer is an issue, it becomes availability. Because a lot of this material will be reallocated and taken out of the normal economy and put into the government-funded economy at your expense. So these things just will not be available to you whatsoever. So that's a thing to keep in mind. We're going to reach the point where we have price controls, wage controls, and non-availability of consumables, because these consumables will be prioritized and taken by the government. So they won't be available to you at any cost. So please comment, share your thoughts, rate, subscribe. We'll see you on the next video.